people from all communities have gathered in full force inside the Lotte Hotel as they are all welcoming. This is a grand, jubilant reception being offered to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. He's shaking hands. He's also signing books, as I can see. He's also been giving his autograph. And in fact, people from all communities, I can see, have gathered over there inside Lotte Hotel to welcome Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And these are extremely heartwarming visuals. The excitement and the euphoria is palpable. All of them, all these members of the Indian diaspora are dying for a glimpse of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Zaka, if I could bring you in on Prime Minister Modi's popularity within the United States. It's heartwarming to see the kind of bipartisan support he's managed. And there was a very significant point that you were making, that most of the voters are, the Indian American voters are Democrat as far as their political leaning are concerned. But when it comes to Narendra Modi, it doesn't matter whether you're a Republican supporter or a Democrat supporter. It's just this, bipartisan support that we've seen him hold with successive presidencies that we've seen, whether it's a Donald Trump or a Barack Obama, and now even a Joe Biden.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, he's been visiting the U.S. Since the last three administrations. He was first here when Obama was president. Then subsequently, when Trump became president, he was there in 2017. And now when Joe Biden is president, he's here in 2023. And if you look at, let's say, for example, the U.S. congressional address, the last time he addressed the U.S. Congress, a Democrat was the speaker. This time around, it's a Republican who's the speaker. And the invitation has come from the Speaker's office, from Kevin McCarthy's office. And then the next day, he will be hosted by the Vice President, Kamala Harris, who happens to be the chair of the Senate, which is the other chamber of the U.S. Congress. So clearly, I think there is bipartisan support for the Indian Prime Minister and for, the idea of engaging with India in a more long-term, both economic and strategic sort of partnership. So I think that bipartisan support is definitely there. It's been there for a number of years, even when the Indo-US civil nuclear deal was signed. We did see how, at that time, a Republican President, George W. Bush, made a one-time exemption for India. It had support from the Democrats as well as from the Republicans. So I think that is a continuing narrative. But to be able to have this kind of an equation with presidents of the United States, irrespective of what their political dispensation is or what their political orientation is, I think that is something that Prime Minister Modi has managed to carve. And that will come in handy because even in, like I said, the defense deals where we're talking about transfer of technology, etc., there has to be congressional backing. Right. The Congress has to pass bills in order to enable the transfer of technology, whether it's the jet deal, the Predator deal, and so on. So I think it's important that that bipartisanship when it comes to India and engaging India in both a more strategic and more economic partnership, I think that is something that is valued across the aisle.
The timing of this visit is extremely significant. Let's not forget that India is also going to be hosting the G20, and that also goes on to indicate how big and vital India is becoming to geopolitics. It's not surprising why India has managed to, in fact, walk that diplomatic tightrope when it comes to even maintaining that non-aligned stance towards Russia or even the war in Ukraine. And yet, India is the country which has been invited for a state dinner. Zaka, can you hear me? All right. Michael Kugelman is one of the foreign policy experts and a leading voice on South Asian geopolitics, is joining me live right now. Thank you so much, Michael, for coming in. I'd like to take that question from you as far as India's role in the changing dynamics of geopolitics is concerned, and what does it speak now of Prime Minister Modi's presence in the United States? I've already highlighted the fact that we as a country will be hosting the G20, and at the same time India has managed to have a non-aligned stance towards the war in Ukraine. Even in terms of walking that diplomatic tightrope with Russia, India has managed to come a long way. with the United States, which, of course, I've also highlighted the fact earlier, was not the same during the Cold War era. What do you make of Prime Minister Modi's presence? This is not to forget, he's made multiple visits in the past, but this is his first state visit to the United States, and he will be hosted for a state dinner by President Joe Biden.
Right. I think that you've hit on a key point that these state visits don't happen very frequently. This is only going to be the third ever state visit by an Indian leader. Even for the U.S., with its various allies and partners, most of those allies and partners are not accorded the honor of a state visit. So I think that begs the question, why? Why is this happening with Modi, and why now? I think you could look at several factors. One is President Biden's own personal views about India and the U.S.-India relationship. He has been one of the most prominent advocates for U.S.-India partnership for a number of years, certainly going back to when he was vice president and going back to when he was a senator. He has oftentimes called for deeper partnership. And he's the one that in the past has described this relationship with India as one of the most consequential relationships for the U.S. of the 21st century. So I think you have to keep that in mind. It's not just the Biden administration, but Biden himself, who really wants to move this relationship forward. And clearly Biden wants to send that message to India by inviting the prime minister for this very prestigious visit. I think we also have to look at the exponential growth in the relationship. Really, since the early 2000s, it's been gaining strength. And really over the last year or two, since both the U.S. and India have seen their relations with China fall to the lowest levels in a number of years, I think that's brought a clarity of purpose to both Washington and New Delhi to find ways to work more closely to counter that Chinese that threat posed by China. So I think, and that's entailed cooperation and security, but in other areas, tech, clean energy. And so I think that the fact that you've had all of this fast-growing cooperation, new areas for collaborations have emerged. I think that for the U.S., for the Biden administration, there is a desire to really celebrate and showcase all of that partnership and cooperation with this state visit.
Absolutely. In fact, when we talk about the state visit, Michael, I'd like to highlight the fact that one of the state visits, this is the third state visit by an Indian leader to the United States. One of those state visits was also made by our previous Prime Minister Manmohan Singh back in the year 2005. What preceded after that was the fact that Washington, D.C. finally announced the Indo-US nuclear deal. What should we now expect from this state visit? Should we expect any significant development? As our managing editor, Zaka Jacob, was also highlighting the fact that, as far as defense ties are concerned, they will need congressional approval. Will this agenda be, first of all, do you see that, in fact, panning or shaping up in any way?
Yeah, so I think that, as Zaka had mentioned, you do have strong levels of bipartisan support on Capitol Hill for U.S.-India partnership. So I don't think that there would be any obstacles in Capitol Hill to taking the final steps to ensure that those new defense deals go through. But I think that's a key point. Anytime you have a high-level summit like this, you'd expect there to be major outcomes, a lot of new agreements and so on. But I think that in the past, one of the obstacles for U.S.-India relations is that expectations are set so high that there's an assumption that every single high-level summit, there'll be some sort of huge splashy deal. And that hasn't happened. But this time, it will happen. And we already know that there's going to be a series of deals, not just in the defense sector, but also across the board, and a remarkably multifaceted array of agreements, and from tech to space to new U.S. consulates in India being announced. And I think that says something for the fact that in this case, the soaring expectations for this visit will likely be met, which is not always the case.
Right.